Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Guerrilla Web Searching. Find what you want and know what you have found. This is part 2 of a multi-part series. This session is a part of a free webinar series offered every week or two by the Spark organization, the Stowe Portage Area Computer Consortium. Spark is an information technology center in Northeast Ohio where we support about 30 school districts. However, this webinar is open to everyone, and we would like to welcome all the people who may have joined us live today who are watching the recording in the future. My name is Anthony, and I am the technology specialist at Spark, and I will be your presenter for this session. My colleague Gary Kurtz will be manning the live Google document for questions and/or comments. The live doc, as well as all the resources for today's webinar, can be found at the URL tiny.cc/SPARCC205. Again, that's tiny.cc/SPARC205. And I would encourage you to go to that site if you have not already done so. If you're watching the recorded version of this webinar, I suggest that you pause the video and go to the resources and print out a copy of the web searching packet to follow along. That link will also take you out to our technology integration site where you will find all the resources for this session today, including the live video stream, which will become the recorded video after this session, help guides, a live session chat document, a session evaluation form, and a quiz to take at the end to earn a certificate of attendance for 1 contact hour. While you are there, be sure to check out the PD schedule of upcoming events, recorded trainings of past webinars. Sign up for our Spark Lines newsletter to always stay up to date with the latest tech integration information that we provide. And finally, if you need to get in touch with us, you can find our contact information under the contact menu link. As a reminder, all of today's webinar can be found at tiny.cc/SPARC205. This is the second in a series of sessions. And if you have not viewed the first session, you may want to pause this session and go to the page to find the information for the first session. And you can watch the first session before you watch this section. It's not absolutely necessary, but if you're interested, you can stop this session, begin the other session, and then come back to the session. If you did not have an opportunity to watch part 1, here's a brief recap of some of the material that was covered in that session. The first thing that was covered was 5 simple things to immediately improve your searching success. And I went into more detail on each of these, but just to give you an idea, I've listed the 5 here. Never use just a single word to search. Always choose the best words for your search. The first searches are to find words for successful search. That's why they call it research. This is sometimes hard to get across to your students. The fourth item is quickly review the sites found for the best possibilities. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the rest of the recap. And finally, Control F, or on a Macintosh, Command F, allows you to find words within a page. So when you find a page, it looks like it might have the material, but you can't find the word. You can search for that using the Control F function. We talked quite a bit about choosing the best words. Just really quickly, some of the things that help: using technical terms as opposed to popular terms, using unique words that are matched up with the topic you're looking for. One-of-kind words are always great, things such as social security numbers, license numbers, phone numbers, etc. Sometimes you want an exact phrase, and you can accomplish that by placing it in parentheses for your search. Also, combinations of words to include and words to exclude from your search. So if you're looking for articles on Bears and you're not interested in football, you may want to exclude the word Chicago. Then last part of our recap, I talked quite a bit about evaluating your results when you find them. And the first thing you need to do is even decide what pages you're going to go to. So I put together a little 3-step process for when you see a list of Google results after you do a search, the three areas that I think you should focus on in the order in which you should focus on them. The first is the focus on the green. That's the URL of the web address. That gives you quite a bit of information, tells you what type of site the information's on. A lot of times it even tells you exactly what it is. For example, if you see it's Amazon.com, you have a pretty good idea that they want to sell you a book, a movie, or something along those lines. The next thing you want to do is view the black portion of the description. That's the part that tells about the site. Probably the largest and least useful of the three is the blue website title. This is set by the person that designs the website and may have very little in common with the material that's on that site. So that's always my last item that I usually take a look at. We're going to be discussing the recursive web searching technique, which I started on in part 1. And again, if you are watching this recorded version and you would like a copy of this, please pause at this point in time and you can print out a copy of the following 4 pages. The first is the flowchart for the recursive web searching technique. Second is a section what we call climbing up and down the tree, which I'll explain in more detail later. The third is a poster that you might find useful for your classroom or your library. And the fourth one is a top 10 tips for successful web searching. Many of these are just much more fuller explanations of the flow chart. So if you're a flow chart type of person, you might find that more useful. If you're a text type of person, you might find the top 10 tips much more useful than the diagram. So today we're going to talk about a couple additional items in searching. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to go back to our chart and we're going to go through our chart and continue in the process of viewing it. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit so you can see a little better. Now, during session 1, we've already taken care of choosing the search engine, advanced search options, choosing the best words. All of the salmon color section on the right here is what we discussed. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to evaluating the pages that we found. The gold section talks about reviewing the pages very quickly in a list, but what I'm talking about now is we found a promising page and we want to evaluate that page. That's the blue portion. So the first question we want to ask is the information there? If the information is not there, that page is not going to help us. But if the information is on the page, the next thing we need to do is evaluate the overall quality of the information. This aspect of information and media literacy is very important and probably one of the most important things your students will need to learn how to do. Whenever you're dealing with information that is not in a curated format, such as you will find many places on the web, you need to be able to decide whether the information is accurate, up-to-date, biased, or whatever it may be. So I've put a section here in light yellow. We'll talk about those various portions. The first is what I call the hierarchy of reliability. That has a lot to do with what type of document is it, who owns the site, etc. So we'll go down through this step by step. The first one is site owner, and if you know who owns the site, that sometimes gives you some clues as to what type of biases the person may have, how they've came across the information. Next one is who links to and from a site. We'll talk about operators that you can use to find that. By the way, to find a site owner, you can do something called a who is search. Now, unfortunately, sometimes when you do the who is search, it shows you who the site is registered to, but that may not be the authors of the site. They may actually be running space on a site that multiple people are utilizing. If you know the author or publisher, if that's shown on the page, sometimes that can be very important for you to decide on the quality. When I talk about type of document, I'm not talking about a PDF versus a Word document. What I'm talking about more is this a college thesis? Is this a second grader's reflections on something? Is this a transcript of a talk? So what type of document are we looking at on the web page? We need to decide whether the page is current and up to date. Now, in the olden days of printed materials, it wasn't uncommon that a book that was 5 to 10 years old was considered up to date. In today's web information, the pace has increased considerably, and current may mean a week old. So depending on what type of information you're looking for, if you're looking for news that's still going on, you're going to want to look for current items. And fortunately, Google has added a search feature that allows you to click on that and search for documents that fall within a certain time range. You can either choose within a week, within a day, within a month, within a year, or you can customize that. And we talked about that in session 1, so I'm not going to go into great detail on that during this session on the advanced search tools of Google. But if you're not familiar with them, please review section number 1 to find out about the advanced search features from the Google site. The next thing is what I refer to as facts or red herrings. Are you seeing a fact on that site that you're not seeing anywhere else? That's the kind of thing that makes you have to decide, does this site have information that's not correct? Or does this information have very correct information, other people are getting it wrong? So sometimes that's hard to do, but when in doubt, I usually err on the side of assuming that if only one site has the information, they could quite possibly be wrong. Now, they may have the cutting edge material that may prove us all wrong in the long run, but quite often when you see statements that don't match up, I'd worry about that. Now, another extreme of that, though, is when sites simply copy each other. So when you see a fact on a page, you could copy that sentence, put it into a search engine, and see what other sites have the exact same sentence in them. When I see that, that tells me that the site has not been thoroughly researched. It's simply been copied from another resource. So it's not a primary source material, and the question as to whether it's valid or not, they've not really made that concerted effort for you. They've simply copied from somewhere else. The last one I refer to the smell test. No, unfortunately, there's not smell-o-vision yet, and Google knows is not out there, so we can't run searches for items that smell. What I'm really talking about is when you take a look at a web page, does it look a little bit fishy? Are there glowing things that jump out at you, such as misspelled words, broken links, images that won't load, very outdated graphics, plugins that don't function properly? So these are all things that you may want to take a look at when you're going through the evaluation of the quality of a site. And that sort of completes our yellow section. Now, as we talked about last time, you're going to need to do this for multiple pages. This is not a one and done type of thing. So in many cases, you're going to be going through this entire process at the top, going back up to finding the right words, previewing pages we found, getting a quick idea of which pages you want to go to, and then when you go to a page, find out if the information is there, and most importantly, to find out what the information really is by doing a thorough site evaluation. So that you'll be repeating that, and that's why it is referred to as recursive web searching technique. I'm going to flip back to our slide presentation for just a second here. And I want to talk about something called operators. Operators are special type of search words that you can utilize to help you find out more information when you're evaluating the quality of a page. Remember before I talked about sites that might link to different sites, or who owned a site, or information about the site? So what I've done here is I've listed some information. I have one page from Google, and then I've also put together a more simplified page, which I think you'll find handy. It has a few additional items on there. And I want to give demonstrations of each of these types of operators. The first one is called a site operator, and this allows you to get results from certain sites or domains that you specify. So for example, if we want to find information that's on a specific site, we might search for a word, then include the operator site, colon, and then the domain that we want to look at. So in the example I'm showing here, we're looking for Olympics information, and we're using the site nbc.com, and that would direct our search. So I've done a couple of these searches for us, and let's take a look at one here real quick. I've done a site search, and I basically said I want to find elephants, and I only want to find elephants that are on time.com. So we're going to look at elephants coming from the time.com magazine, and you'll see that there's a number of them here. Elephants seem to be a rather popular topic with Time, as there with anyone. It's the 3,000-pound elephant in the room. so it's kind of hard to miss it. Our next type of search is called a link site, a link operator. By using the operator link colon, we can put in a website and see who links to and who links from that site. Now, many of you have probably heard of this site because it's used in a lot of instructional teaching on media literacy and information literacy, because this is a site that is very misleading in its name. So you're going to see through here it talks about web credibility exercise, etc. But what I want you to notice right here is that some of these pages that are linking to it are from relatively controversial sites, such as the davidduke.com site, which we know probably is not a site that has a favorable view of Martin Luther King. But you can see the different sites that link to and link from a site by using the link operator. Our next operator is called related. Related colon, again, is what we would use. Then we can put a search word in there and we will see relationships between different things with that word. So for example, I've used related colon animals, and it talks about different pairs of animals, 5 species of animals that you would not believe that are related. So this is a way that you can find websites on related materials. This is also a good way when you're searching. When you find something, you can find sites that are related to that site or similar to that site. So sometimes this is referred to as a similar site search, but the operator you would use is called related. Our next operator is called entitle. Entitle means that the search word is in the title of the site name. So again, that blue site name that we talked about earlier, that's what we're talking about. And when we use entitle colon, put a search word there. I've used the word Olaf, and you'll see that all of these site names in blue have Olaf or some different language variation of the word Olaf in them. So we have everything from Saint Olaf to Frozen Olaf in the summer, to Disney Frozen Surprises Olaf. So we notice that there's quite a few here. We could do this type of entitle search whenever we want to find something that's in the title of a website. Remember though, as I said earlier, website titles are not always the best indicator of the quality of the information on that page when you initially evaluate it. So that takes us to our next item, and that is an asterisk. An asterisk can be used as a wildcard when you don't remember quite how to spell something. Now, I do know how to spell railroad. There's a lot of words I have trouble with, but I do know how to spell railroad. But railroad is one of those single safe words that I can use. Remember, I talked about never search for a single word, and I'm doing it here, so I want to make sure there was a word that would not be offensive. And you notice what's happened is it's found the word railroad very easily from the abbreviation. Now it looks like I might have missed one of our choices here. In addition to in title, we also have in URL. In the in URL, that means it'll look for the word in the web address. So we'll go ahead and we'll see now that in our web address, we're seeing the word Olaf right here in green. And as we click on each of these sites, we should be seeing the word Olaf somewhere in the URL for each of the sites. This is a fun operator, very easy to use. Some of you might have tried this already or done it by accident. It's the VS, versus. So when you want to compare 2 things or 3 things, you can put a VS between them. So here I've compared cat versus dog. And you can see that Google gives us a brief little page here. And we click on the down arrow, you'll see that that expands. So we could compare 2 things by using the VS operator. The final operator I want to discuss here is a very simple operator that you may also have used before. It's the OR operator. In other words, I'm looking for trucks, but I want to find trucks that are either Chevys or Fords. So that would eliminate Dodge and Toyota and other trucks, but it would give me sites that would have one or both of these 2 brands of trucks on them. So these are examples of operators. And the operators work very well when we go back to our chart when we're doing our evaluation of the website and we're deciding whether the information is there that we need and whether the quality of the information is there. They also function very well when we're doing our initial search sometimes. If we're looking for the words that we want, using the word or will allow us to search for more than one word at a time. And of course, there's many other things that we talked about earlier in part 1, such as putting words in quotations when we want an exact phrase. So let's continue down our recursive web searching chart here. We found the information we wanted, it was there, and we evaluated the quality of some pages, and now the information has passed the quality check because we've ran through the yellow section. So it leads us to the point saying, have you found what you want and know what you have found? So once you've found what you want and know what you found, you can say yes, and you're successful in finding the information you're looking for in your search. Now, unfortunately, sometimes the answer is not yes, the answer is no. So when we would end up with the no, that means we're either missing the information we need or we're not really sure what we found is accurate. So what we can do is we can go back through our recursive web searching process, but I would also suggest some of these other items be included in your search that are shown down here in the gray, looking in specific domains where we can use that in URL operator, using online databases, which may be available to you through your school district. Most of the time online databases are purchased, but there are some online databases that are available for free. Well, a good example of that is the CIA Fact Book. That is an online database of information on countries that is available to anyone for free, and it's a very high quality information there. Also, you notice in the gray, we might want to choose to exclude or include specific sites. So if we're finding sites that look promising, we might want to include those in our search, and we can actually put the URL right in with the other words we're searching for, and that might help us find information on that site that we missed the first time around. The last thing we need to think about before we go back up to the top is you need to think about whether you either need to narrow your search or widen your search. In other words, if you're getting close but you're not really getting exactly where you want to go, you may want to narrow your search. If you're not finding anything that even comes close, you may want to widen your search because you may be excluding sites that would potentially have the information you'd like. So what happens is, after we go through that, we return through our whole process again. Now I know, Anthony, that's a lot of stuff to go through, and do you do that every time you do it? As I said in session 1, no, it's something that you develop a skill. After you use this chart for a while, you'll sort of do these things automatically, and so will your students if you spend some time going through this chart. Now, we had 2 answers. We found the information or we didn't find the information. That's great. Now, in most things, close doesn't count. In horseshoes, close counts, and in web searching, close counts. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. If you think you found the information you want and know what you found, but it isn't exactly the exact item you want, but you know it's close to what you have, you can come in and what I call tweak the URL. In other words, we're going to change the web address in the address bar on the search site and see by tweaking that a little bit, can we narrow down what we're looking for. So we're not really doing another search, we're changing the URL that's showing up in our address book and altering it slightly. Now I've given this 2 nice friendly sounding names, and I refer to it as climbing up the tree and climbing down the tree. Now, when I refer to tree, this isn't the kind that grows out in your yard, although it's easy to think about this as a tree in some ways. I'm talking more about the fact that if you're used to using computers for quite a while, you are familiar with the fact that there are directories and then subdirectories inside them. Some people call them folders, some people call them directories. Well, whichever, when you get to the very root of things, that is all the way up the tree. So you would not have a very long address. So for example, if we're talking about documents, our root of our documents might be our hard drive. And then we might have a folder in there called My Documents. In My Documents, we might have another folder called Letters. In Letters, we might have another folder called 2010. In 2010, we might have another folder. So you notice each time we're doing this, we're extending the tree out further and further. Well, web pages work along the same lines in that we start from a root, and then we can add subpages and subsections to our web page, the same as we would add folders to our stored documents. Now, climbing up a tree is very, very easy to do. And you can think about that and remember that by the fact that most cats have no problem climbing up a tree. Unfortunately, climbing down the tree sometimes is much more difficult. So let's first talk about climbing up the tree and give some examples of how it might work. Climbing up the tree can be very simple, and as simple as going to our site that we have, which I'm going to go to here in a second. And we see now that I have a long address here, and I'm on a football site. Now, for those of you that speak English, US English as opposed to British English, you're probably saying that's soccer. Well, they call it football in the rest of the world. We're the only ones that refer to it as soccer. And my daughter's a rabid English Premier League soccer fan. She spent a semester in England, and she adopted a team there. So what we see here is I've gotten close because her favorite team is not Chelsea. Her favorite team is Arsenal. But, you know, I know they're both in the same league, so I know I'm close. So what I simply do is I take my mouse and I go up to the very top of my address bar. This may be hard for you to see, so I'm going to describe it as I go through the process. I'm going to go to the top, and it says, the last part says /Chelsea. So I'm going to go in, and I'm going to take everything out, including the furthest to the right /. That slash bar that I'm talking about is the key, the same slant key that's on your keyboard with the question mark. So I'm going to go in, and I'm simply going to delete that from my URL, my address. I'm going to press enter, and that will reload the page. And you notice now we still have football information, but now we have expanded very greatly our leagues. And here we go. Here's Arsenal. We could simply click on Arsenal, and we'd be right where we wanted to be on my daughter's favorite team. So you notice how easy it was to climb up the tree in that case. But let's say we really weren't interested in Arsenal. We get to this page and we notice it's all football. And you know what? I'm really not interested in football. I'm going to find out about some other sports. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to remove teams. So let's try removing that and see what happens. Well, this is an example of we're still in football because all we've done is gotten rid of the teams. Now we're talking about football in general. So let's go up here again. Let's remove football and press enter. And we're still at football. And that's because we still have one more little item to climb over. So we're going to climb over this last remaining 0. So we're now going to press enter. And you notice now we're on a general site with sports. There's still football there, but now we have rugby, we have cricket, we have cycling, we have European football, we have a whole variety of sports. So you notice as we climbed up the tree, we've moved into a more general area. And what usually happens, after you climb up the tree, you sometimes need to climb back down again. So I'm going to go to cricket. And you notice that my URL will now change to show cricket as the sport in the list. So sometimes we climb down the tree, we climb up the tree so we can then climb down one branch to where we want to be. Let's finish by climbing all the way to the end of this tree by taking everything out, all the slashes, press enter, and now you notice we're at the most general point of our whole website. This is the root of the website, also known as the home page. So this is BBC News. Notice we still have football news here. We've seen this picture many times, but we now have a whole wide variety of news from around the world from the BBC. So you notice it was fairly easy to climb up the tree and do what we wanted to do. Now, climbing down the tree is a little more difficult because it involves a couple things. The first thing is it involves substitution. Sometimes we can simply go in and substitute information and find out what we want. Other times we have to guess an ending for the item because we want to extend or add things to the end as opposed to taking them off as we did before. So let's look at an example of climbing down the tree. Let's return back to our websites here. And I have an example here. I was interested in finding movies, the top 10 grossing films of 2010. But look what happened. I'm very close. I found 2011, but not 2010. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go up and examine my address bar, and I'll notice in my URL that the word the numbers 2011 are in there twice. Let's try changing that 2011 to 2010. I'll do this for both of them because it appears you need both of them. Keep my mouse to the end of the line. Notice I'm not taking anything away. I've substituted some things. I'm going to press enter, and we'll see what magically happens. And wow, we got exactly what we wanted. Let's try it again. Let's see if we can find the top 10 grossing movies of 2003. Let's be careful not to take any extra characters out because we only want to take out the last 2 digits here. And guess what? It worked. So we've pretty much figured out the pattern that's involved. And that's what you really do when you're climbing down the tree, is you're guessing and trying to match the patterns of the web designer. In this case, it turned out to be fairly simple. Many other times it's very difficult. For example, let's say we found a document, we find a page, and it's a document. It's a PDF document, so we can't type on it, we can't change it, but we really would have loved to have a word processing document. Now, for those of you that are familiar with file endings, we know that PDF files have a period.pdf at the end of them on Windows computers, and word processing files have a period .doc or .docx at the end of them. So if we have a web address that ends in .pdf, we can try changing that to .doc. Press enter. 9 out of 10 times, maybe even 95 out of 100 times, you will be unsuccessful, but occasionally you will be successful because that PDF had to come from somewhere. So there was a Word document that originally started the whole thing, and a lot of times it's left in the same folder or directory by the web designer. So very unlikely you're going to find what you want, but when you find it, you're so excited that you will keep trying to climb down the tree, even though it's a lot harder to do. So climbing up the tree, very easy to do. Climbing down the tree, much, much harder to do, but extremely rewarding when you are able to guess or substitute information in the website address and find the information that you thought you were close to, but not quite there. So when we go back to our chart, you'll see that we now complete our chart. Now you notice that it never really quite ends because it's recursive. Notice what happens when we climb up or down the tree, we're going to end up with a new page. Guess what we needed to do? Even though we found a new page, we still have to go back through and do the evaluation process. Now, it might be a little bit easier because we might have already evaluated that site that it's on, but we still need to evaluate the information we find on that page. So you're still going back up and doing the evaluation portion on the website. There's no way around it. It's probably one of the most important things you would teach your students how to do, and that's evaluating the information. So we pretty much completed the whole recursive web searching process. I'm going to go ahead and close this. And we're going to go on and look at a couple other things. Recently I did a talk, and the title of it was Don't Be a One Search Wanderer. And it referred to the fact that a lot of times people only use one search engine. And there are many, many more than that. I have a site where I maintain a list, and you'll notice in this list there are currently 246. This goes up and down over time because sites come and sites go. Some sites that are really good unfortunately disappear. Some sites that are brand new will appear in their place. So this number hovers around the 225 to 270 mark, and it varies. So I try to keep up with it. Again, if you're using my site and you find a link that does not work, please email me. My address is at the bottom of all my web pages, so I can correct that and make sure it either has the right link or I remove it from the site if it's not appropriate or it has a bad link now. Now you might say, Anthony, where did you find this? Well, all of the information that Eric and I maintain for our technology integration is very easy to find. It's at ti.apps.spark.org. And you'll also see that on the page when you go to our resources page for each of the sessions. And here we go. Here's our professional development section. The one with the little red eye on it that says Technology Information Resources, we're going to go ahead and click on that. That's my general interest website. Eric has been nice enough to brand it for me. He calls it the Web Resource Hoarder Site, and I thought that was a pretty appropriate name because it is packed with resources. This is something you may want to share with your students, your friends, your family, because there's something here for everyone. What we're going to focus on today, though, is the fact that there is a whole page on searching. So I'm going to click on that link, and you'll notice when we go to this link, this takes you to our handouts that we use today, so you can print them from here. Also has 2 pages on operators. There's also a booklet, about a 40-some page booklet called Hitchhiker's Guide to Using the Internet. Unfortunately, it's really out of date. I haven't updated it since 2011, so I need to get around to re-updating that because 2011 is a long period of time in search life. There's also a great link here to a site called Teacher Tech by Alice Keeler. She has a whole section on searching. It's very funny. I encountered her site fairly recently, and it mimics a lot of my ideas on searching. So yeah, I always like to point out links to sites that sort of match my own ideas. I think we all sort of do that. So let's take a look at this chart here real quick, and you notice that the table of search sites being 246 is very long. We're right down to the I's now. They're in alphabetical order, by the way. At the very beginning of the chart, I do have a few in green. These are ones I'm highlighting right now. They're sites that I either knew or sites that I find very interesting that a lot of people don't know about. So I put them in green so you can find them a little easier. But please feel free to utilize all these. If you go to the link on the page, you will see something that looks like this. If you do go to the link, though, that goes specifically to the spreadsheet, because that's just an embedded Google spreadsheet. If you go directly to the spreadsheet, you can take advantage of the spreadsheet's filtering function. So I can come in here where it says type of site. I can click on the drop down, choose clear, and then I can choose one or more specific types of sites. Today we're going to look quite a bit at something called computational search tool engines. So I'm going to click on computation. I'm going to click OK, and you notice now it has filtered it. Now, if you're not familiar with spreadsheets and filtering, there are 2 webinars available to you, Spreadsheets 101, Spreadsheets 102, that are available at our site where I go over this material, and soon there'll be a Spreadsheets 103 because spreadsheets is one of my favorite things, probably only second to searching in technology. So let's take a look at a couple of these sites I mentioned and some of these ones I featured. Let's look at some computational search engines first. The first one I want you to take a look at is Wolfram Alpha. There is both a paid and free version of this. We're going to use the free version. Wolfram Alpha, every time I go there, they've added new material. So before, it just was this top part of the page that we see up here with the search bar. Now they've actually expanded it and put in, well, it looks like 40 maybe different little links here. So it tells you how to search for specific things. So it tells you how to narrow in and find things. Right now, we're just going to do a really general search. I'm just going to compare some information from 3 countries. So let's pick 3 countries here. Let's pick China, Laos, and India. We're going to stay in the continent here of Asia. We click the search button. Now, Wolfram Alpha is pretty useless if you're trying to find popular culture items or frequent news items. And I misspelled Laos, of course. So we're just going to have to settle for just a comparison of China and India. And you notice that it's asking us, is China a given name? No, it's not. It's a country. So it was smart enough to figure that out. So we notice that first thing it tells us is what's the full name that we call this. This would be the name that would be used at the United Nations when they call the roll. Then it also has the native name in the native language. Of course, this is not truly the way it appeared. This is just a romanization of the characters so that we'd be able to pronounce it. Also has the international codes, has their flags, has maps, has statistics on land area with continents on, population density, languages, ethnic mix, religions, etc., etc. So we could put 2, 3, 4, 5 countries in here and quickly do a lot of comparisons between them. This one's very interesting. There's almost twice as many vehicles in China as there are in India, but the total amount of road miles is almost identical. So there's quite a few more vehicles on those roads in China, so I'm assuming they're a little more crowded. and a little bit different. Another very interesting thing, let's look at the mobile cell phone subscriptions. We got 1.286 billion versus 944 million. So we notice that a large portion of both populations have cell phones. And there's more information. We can keep going on down through the list. So we can simply use Wolfram Alpha to do something like compare countries or compare different things, and it gives us statistics. Wolfram Alpha is not really a search engine. It goes out to databases that are curated by people, and it pulls information, and that's why we call it a computational database or search site. So what we're going to do is we're going to now search for a proper name, and we're going to just see what it tells us about Linda. And I'll have to admit, Linda is named my wife. So in honor of her, we will do a search for Linda. But I also want to show you this because it's a very interesting search. It tells us how common the name is, how many people have this, and then it shows us a graph. And this chart that it shows us is very interesting. You notice that around 1940, 42, we started to get Lindas, and then we had a huge number of Lindas, and then by the late 70s, almost no Lindas. So most of the Lindas were born during this period of time. So this would be a good question to ask your students, a what-if question. I love what-if questions. By the way, when you use what-if questions, it's very hard to plagiarize because what-if questions require them to do some analysis and comparison. So I'm going to ask the question, then I'll give you the answer real quick. I'll just give you a few seconds to think about it. Why does this peak look the way it does? There's two very good reasons. You probably know about one, but I'm going to tell you about the second one. Well, the first one you might have guessed is it's right in the middle of the baby boom. So almost every name was increasing at that time because there was a large number increase in the number of children being born. But there's another thing that happened. In the early 40s, there was a song that was on the top 40 for a long time called the Linda Song. Now what happens is when something in popular culture occurs, quite often people start naming their offspring after that. So there was a same sort of peak for the name Diana when Princess Diana first got married. A lot of people named their children. So you can also see that type of peak on it. So that's just an example of Wolfram Alpha and some of the things you can do with it. There's so many more things. We're just going to breeze over the surface of it. The next one I wanted to give you a little look at is something called Google Books Ngram Viewer, just Ngram Viewer. It's part of the Google search tools. What this does is it uses the collection of books that Google Books has, and it looks for specific words in those books and then gives you a comparison between different words. So I put in some presidents' names from the early 1900s, late 1800s, early 1900s, and you'll see how frequently they're mentioned in different books and how often the words are there. Now, you look back and you say, okay, 1800, none of these presidents were alive yet. Well, you'll notice that the word Wilson is very high because the word Wilson is used for, it's quite a common name. So it's been used throughout history, and it isn't specifically pointing to President Woodrow Wilson. I could have put first and last names in and made this a little more involved, but it's simply I put in last names. One of the nice things about this is you can adjust the time frame. So we know that we're only interested in the time frame about 1890. So let's do that, and let's zoom in. And we're also only interested up to 1960. So let's just zoom in, and this will give us a better view of the differences during those time periods. So you notice the Roosevelt name increased drastically after we had first Teddy Roosevelt and then Theodore Roosevelt's administration. Hoover increased at the time when Herbert Hoover became president and then continued on in the language. So you notice that these coincide somewhat with the reign of each of these presidents. I've done another Ngram search. They're so much fun to do. And I've just punched in some fruits. And by the way, a tomato is a fruit. And we're going to look at the fruits. And the nice thing is when you move your mouse on top of the line, it shows you statistics for all the different items, but it also tells you which line that is. So when we click on this line right here, we see the apples. We can trace it all the way back. And you notice back in 1915, apples are right in the middle of the pack, but then they really peaked about 1990. And having children at that time, I know they were proficient drinkers of apple juice, so maybe that's why it popped up so much there, and it sort of dropped off a little bit. That's sort of interesting. It's very interesting, though, if you look at peach. Let's go back and look at peach, and you'll see that peach was the second highest fruit in 1915, but the highest fruit of the whole list was the lime. So in 1920, the lime was the most popularly referred to fruit in books. Now remember, all of these are just surveys of words in books, so they are somewhat biased in that respect. Another computational search engine is called Gapminder. And Gapminder allows you to look at information in very graphic formats. So what we see here is each of these circles represents a country. The larger the population of the country and the larger the landmass of the country, the larger the circle. The color indicates what continent it is on. So you notice that if we move our mouse over the Americas, we see all the yellow flash. We move over Asia, we see all the Asia flash. This shows us life expectancy versus capital income. So let's go down here and just focus on one country. We see the Central African Republic, not a real good place to live. Average lifespan less than 55 years, and average income per person is $585. So they probably are connected. Let's zoom up here now to this very large one. Here's India. Life expectancy of 66, but notice it's very large because it has a much higher population than these other places. I'll let you guess the next one. I'm going to move on to another very large one. It's in Asia. This is going to be China. You might have guessed that already. And notice the median age is 77 and the income per person. Now, I'm going to jump over here in a moment to this large yellow thing, but some of you may already guess what the large yellow circle is going to be. And it is the United States, and it's showing the information. But it's not the highest in life expectancy. Notice that Japan is the highest on this chart, and some of the other very high ones are Hong Kong, Andorra. Andorra is a very tiny country, so it's probably skewed a little bit in the figures. Statistics are always skewed when you have a very small sample size. By the way, for those of you that aren't geography addicts like me, Andorra is a small country between Spain and France. So that's your task for today, is look up Andorra. And while you're at it, you may want to look up Catalan, the Catalan region of Spain, which has recently voted to possibly become an independent state. So we would then have another country in between France and Spain. So that's Gapminder. Let's look at another search tool here. This isn't a computational search engine, but I sort of like it because it has a lot of features to it. It's called Instagrog. And Instagrog is a graphical type of interface that you can see a relationship. So I typed in the word railroad and searched for it, and it gives me all peripheral information about railroads. So if I click here on Civil War, you'll see that it'll give me information about railroads during the Civil War. And by the way, the Civil War was one of the first wars that involved railroads as a key tool in the combat. It also allowed things that never happened in wars before, such as being able to transport the dead back to their originating area for burial within days, as opposed to not being able to do that in previous conflicts. We could type another word in here and simply look for another word. But what I want to show you first is we can also adjust the difficulty of the reading level. So for younger children, we can move our reading level down, or we can move it up. So this is a very interesting site you might want to explore. I've only just touched on some of the features, but there's a lot more features available on Instagrog that you might find useful. Let's take a look at a couple of the other search tools that are available in our large chart. Let's get to the right one. You notice the topics first of all, and we'll just take a look at what the different topics are. These are all the different types of sites I've divided them into. Now this is not always accurate, and sometimes they overlap each other, so some sites might fall under more than one of these categories. So I've chosen the category that they fit the best. General search engines such as Google would fall into this category. Aggregators and meta search tools are sites that utilize more than one search engine to do a search. So for example, the search site Dogpile would allow you to do a meta search. So let's go ahead and do that real quick here. We'll go to that website site. And we'll go to there and do a search. And you'll notice when we do a search there, let's do our locomotives. Locomotive. It's pulling information in from multiple sites, and it's telling us information from different sites. So it's pulling from Google and Yahoo, and I think it's also pulling from Bing here. I'm not positive. We could go through more information on it, but it's pulling it from multiple sites. So it's called a meta search engine. Some of the other things that are included in the chart here, there are some things that aren't truly search engines, but are research tools such as Creative Commons copyright and citations and bibliography information for writers. There's a whole section with educational sites that are both for students and about education and academics. A lot of food sites. I love food, so there's a lot of information. Image searches. I want to talk a little bit about image searches. Image searches, search sites such as TinEye don't search for words. They actually do a reverse image search. So you either upload an image to them or you provide a URL of an image and it will search for that. So we're going to wait for TinEye to open here. And you notice it wants us to either put in an uploaded image or put in a URL of an image. So let's just simply go back here and we'll grab a real quick image of my colleague. And we'll just get the image URL. We'll go back to TinEye. We'll put in the URL. We'll hit the search button. It will now go out and search for that image. And notice it found that image in a couple different places. Now, sometimes it's very interesting. You can find clip art and you'll find it in thousands and thousands of places. When you do find multiples, they allow you to also find the ones that are most altered or changed from the original one. The biggest image in pixels, the newest image found, and the oldest version. So you can always go through and utilize those, but those are really only effective when you have a large number of images. Now, something I just noticed a few days ago is that Google lets you search for images also, but recently if you're using Chrome and you right-click your mouse on an image, it now has the ability to search Google for that image directly from the image. So let's go ahead and search and see if we find this image anywhere else. And there it's tried to match it up and it missed on everyone. But they all sort of look like me, I guess. Let's see if we can do the other picture on the page. We'll do a find image here. And it's found quite a few pictures of Eric. And it's also found some pictures that it thought looked a little bit like Eric. This person sort of does. I don't think this person looks like it at all. So this is called, this is built in Chrome. So you have to be in Chrome to be able to utilize this Google search tool from within Chrome by using a right click. Now, if you're using a Macintosh, it's a shifted click. If you're using a Chromebook, you can either use an alt click or you can use two-finger tap to bring up a right click and be able to mimic this same sort of thing. Well, we're almost out of time, but let's just take a quick look at a few other sites here on our site list. Let's go back up to the top. Let's try one of the ones I'm featuring right now. It's called Sweet Search. Sweet Search is interesting because it is a free site, but it is also a curated site. In other words, all the search sites that are being searched are ones that have been selected by people. And they're experiencing difficulties. So anytime you're displaying things on the web, you're always at the vulnerability of something being down. So unfortunately, Sweet Search is down, so you'll have to investigate that on your own in the future. That's why I always try and have plenty of examples, because sometimes things might be off. So let's take a look at something here called Google. I think you've all probably heard of Google before, but you may not be aware of the fact that in addition to the Google that you usually use, there's actually a wide variety of Google sites. There's the general Google site, the advanced site, which comes off the general site, Google Books, which we actually used tangentially for ngram search, but there's actually a whole section on searching for books, especially books that are out of print. You can out of copyright, you can find books a lot of times the entire text. There's also a Google custom search, which you can build your own search tab on your website. Google Finance, Google Images, which we did by using a right click earlier. Google News, Google Planet, Google Scholar, which looks at academic and educational materials. Google Trends used to be formerly called Zeitgeist. It looks at things that are popular on the web. And let's go ahead and take a look at Zeitgeist and see if we can get it to show us some things that are currently active on the page. And unfortunately, we're going to get another problem because we're going to get another bounce. So I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to call it a day for today. I just want to remind you that after you watch this webinar, whether you're watching it live or in real time, you can go back to our professional development site, and you can go to our recorded webinars and view this in the future. Again, it's tiny.cc/spark, SPARCC 205. So when you go to the site, you will see that we have a couple things for you to complete. So in addition to being able to watch the video, the resources are here, which I talked about earlier. There's also an evaluation. We really appreciate it if you would fill out the evaluation. That helps us develop webinars and improve our webinars for you. Also, if you have suggestions on webinars you'd like to see either myself or Eric do in the future, please contact us. We're always looking for topics. The last item is the session quiz. If you're interested in receiving 1 hour of graduate contact time for this, simply click on this link. It'll take you out to the quiz, and if you receive a passing score, it will automatically send you a certificate of completion. If you do not get a passing score, it will send you a little email with some suggestions on reviewing things, and you can then go back and take the quiz again if you'd like. So finally, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this event, whether it's live or recorded, and we hope to see you over the coming weeks for more educational technology webinars. And again, by going to our site, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and the newsletter will give you announcements of upcoming items. So again, subscribe to the Sparklines newsletter. So thank you again, and hope to see you again over the coming weeks. In the meantime, make sure you always find what you want and know what you found. Happy searching.